December 27th. It's my birthday, my birthday, my birthday. Yay. Anyways, big deal. Just another year under my belt. Anyways, man, we've got a good show. Interesting convo with my man Patrick. What's up, buddy? How you doing, sir?
Hold up.
Can you hear us?
I got a malfunction going on right now. Oh,
Uh-oh.
what's going on? Hold up. Let me come back real quick.
Okay, just go on in and out. So tonight we're just gonna have a conversation came up about defining terms like atheism, agnosticism, theism, pantheism. Why is it so important to define terms? Um, why do we want who and whose terminology wins out? How do we decide which terms to use? Right? Like, these are the questions. I talk a lot with different people, and for fun, and I talk to theists and people like that, and oftentimes what they'll do is they'll say, well, if you're an atheist, then you believe these things, or if you're a pantheist, then you believe you're supposed to believe these. And so what happens is oftentimes it gets into a straw man. A straw man is kind of like building, a pretend argument for your interlocutor so that you can burn it down. It's easy to destroy something, an argument that you want to have. It's not so easy to actually deal with what your interlocutor really believes. So it's always good to define terms and meet people where they are. Now, some people just can't do that. They just can't do it because they feel for some reason that to do that would be um, against their argument. You know, Maybe they feel like it's a straw man in reverse or whatever. But I don't see it that way. I see it like you know, you just deal with people what their arguments really are rather than what you think they should be. That's the honest approach. And always use the principle of charity. Let people define their own terms. And hello, everybody in the audience. I just want to give a shout out. We've got Frank Lavelle in the house. He says, 50 years, I've long 50 years thought agnosticism was about knowledge or lack of knowledge. Um, I mean, in a more rigorous way, agnosticism has to do with the question of God rather than anything else. In the philosophical definition, you could go to like these Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and get these definitions of what a true agnostic is. Agnostic says God cannot be known. The concept of God is not known and cannot be known, right? From what I understand. Now, agnosticism for a lot of people these days simply means I don't know something about something. Could be about anything. Like I would colloquially use that terminology for myself. Like I could say, I don't know what the fundamental ontology of this reality really is. Why? Because I'm not omniscient. I'm not God. I haven't been to every corner of the universe, circumspecting every piece of reality to know in my mind what the true reality is. In fact, there's a certain set of equations called Gödel's theorem, uncertainty, or Gödel's incompleteness theory. Sorry. And what it proves, because a theory is different than a theorem. A theorem is a proof. A theory is not a proof. A theory is kind of like the facts that explain an idea or a certain explanation, roughly. But a theorem is kind of true. And so Gödel's incompleteness theorem says that no matter how much you learn, it's never going to be fully known. You're never going to know everything, because the more you know about something, there's more that hinges on a framework, or it hinges on a premise that itself, like an axiom that needs to be proven. So every theory wants one miracle. Like I say, if you say the Big Bang theory, well, give us the Big Bang. We can't explain how the Big Bang happened, but give us that miracle and we can explain everything else. And so Gödel's theorem would say something like, well, you can know everything about the observable universe, but now you don't know how to explain your axiom, the Big Bang. Where did that come from? You need to develop that. And even if you came with an answer to that, well, in order to arrive at that, you have had to have created another framework in order to explain that. Now that needs to be explained. So it just goes on and on and on for infinity. There's always something that you don't know. That's what Gödel's theorem is trying to lay out. So in that respect, I'm an agnostic to a lot of things. I believe that because it's proven. It's a theorem. And the only thing I really know is that I exist and I'm experiencing my existence. That's what I know for 100%. Anyways, what do you think about that, Pat? What's your thought on that?
Oh, first off, happy birthday. I thought you said it's your birthday today.
It's my birthday.
Oh man, that's cool. That's cool. You just chilling in on your birthday. I don't really do much for my birthday most times. I just chill. Back in the
Yeah.
day, I guess it used to celebrate it a lot. But agnosticism. So agnostic, I had a problem with that definition before because I didn't think, like, to me personally, like an agnostic wouldn't have any opinion at all on God, right? So they would neither disbelieve nor believe God. That's where I'm coming from as an agnostic. And I wouldn't claim nothing can be known of God because I wouldn't know that, right? I would be like, I can't know that nothing can be known of God. Perhaps something can be known of God. Maybe science will deduce God ultimately. I can't say as an agnostic. That's where I'm coming from. So I wouldn't make that claim. I think that's a claim based on God to be saying nothing is known or can be known of God. So I don't know how that an agnostic would come to that. Maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, I mean, some people just don't mind inheriting the burden of proof like that. Like they they obviously, whenever you make a claim like God cannot be proven, so what they're doing is they're assuming that they know for all time no one will ever figure this thing out. No one, and no one ever has figured this out. They can't really honestly make
That's
that
what I'm
claim.
saying. It's like that's a lot of hubris to me. To
Mhm.
it seems like they're a little too cocky to be saying that because
Yep.
science. Maybe we will have the God science one day. I can't say. I don't think we have the technology at this point in time for sure. I was wondering about that article you shared was interesting that you had on Fight on the Fence
Mhm.
where it was talking about the quantum entanglement. I tried to wrap my
Mhm.
mind around that, but I don't know if I even comprehended it. I read like the article and then I was like, I still am not sure what that means.
Yeah, I
Is
understand
it
it.
like reality?
It's
Like they're saying, are they saying the laws of physics aren't sound? That just
mm-mm.
it seems like really weird to me to be like, because I think I don't know when you mix the quantum world with the cosmos at large. Like I thought, like several scientists said that doesn't mix. Like I thought, like Einstein had said something to that effect. Like perhaps the quantum world doesn't mesh up with the cosmos at large, and you may not even can have a theory of everything, like how string theory wants to deduce that the quantum, equate the quantum with the cosmos at large, and then they come up with a theory and a mathematical proof, and maybe the mathematical proof holds up, but
Hmm.
in the real world, maybe we might not observe 13 dimensions or whatever that states. So that
Hmm.
that I find, I don't know. Like I say before, I think Roger Penrose had a problem with some of these ideas, and like
Well,
AI,
Roger
for example.
Roger Penrose,
Go
and he endorses. So let me kind of explain what's going on with that. So a long time ago, um, you had where the theory of quantum mechanics was discovered, right?
ahead.
And now Einstein had developed the theory of relativity and general relativity. And on the other on the other side, you had a guy named, I think it was Max Planck, who was looking at quantum, the light photons, and the very small subatomic particles. Anyways, make a long story short, we he kind of looked at entanglement and superposition and some of the weird behavior of quantum particles at that level of reality. Now, these were considered spooky action at a distance, according to Einstein. He didn't believe it. He said, that's bullshit. He said, what it means is that all it really means, according to Einstein, is that you just don't have all your facts together. You have some of them, and now you're running with it. You're not taking your time to discover and complete the theory. If you complete it, it'll all come together because it has to. If it doesn't, then it's something's wrong. In Einstein, it can't be Newtonian physics or relativity. Can't be that. That all adds up. So this quantum stuff is, you've got to have something you're not seeing. So for the last 80, 90 years, people have been investigating it. And so we have a guy named, I think his name was John Bell, and he devised an experiment that could actually put it to the test, to put entanglement to the test, and see if that is it local realism or not. And so then you had this other guy. His name was Bohr. He said, what's going to complete quantum mechanics is we're going to discover these hidden variables. He had a theory called pilot wave theory, which basically says there's this universal wave function, this hidden, and it's determining everything that's going to happen. So there's no spooky action. It's basically just that there's the laws of physics that are at work, and you're just not seeing all the laws. If you had knowledge of all the laws, then you could put them together and you could make sense of what you're seeing in quantum mechanics. But Bell challenged it with Bell's inequality test, and then later on this century, I think in 2014, the Big Bell test. And so he pretty much prove that quantum mechanics is the way to go. That quantum mechanics holds that there's these two dimensions of reality. There's the relativistic, which is the very big, and then there's the quantum, which is the very small. The quantum just simply works on its own laws. It doesn't mesh well with relativity. Why? Because quantum mechanics is very small. And for these certain quantum like entanglement, superposition, things of these nature, quantum tunneling, all that stuff requires very low temperatures and isolation. But as you get bigger, photons start hitting some of these particles, and everything collapses into a reality, so to speak. So it's called the observer effect. So once you observe, like a double slit experiment is a way to prove that if you shine a light on this thing, it can create how the probabilities are going to fall out in reality. Before you measure it, they're all over the place, which is weird. And so Bell says, well, that means fundamental reality is just everywhere. It's in every location. Like every infinite possibility is out there randomly. And once you observe, then it becomes a particular direction or a particular reality in Newtonian, or the Newtonian space, you might say, like in this domain of reality that we experience, because we don't experience quantum fields. We only experience, you know, rocks, billiard balls hitting each other. So, anyways, these three scientists this year, back in October, won the Nobel Prize for putting the nail in the coffin on that. That actually, the real reality, the reality beyond the reality we experience, is just random. It's just random information. It's just a bunch of information out there, and everything's tied together. Everything's tied together through entanglement. Entanglement doesn't care about locality. You could have an atom here, and on the other side of the universe, those two things could be tied together. And if you change the properties of one, it will change the properties of the other entangled particle, which is on the other side of the universe, instantaneously, faster than the speed of light, which, according to Einstein, is just spooky and impossible. But they did the experiments, they did the tests, and the guys won a Nobel Prize. So what this pretty much proves is that the fundamental reality is not anything like what we experience in our daily life. We're just experiencing the projection of that. Like all this information is projected into our observable universe, this physical universe. What we
Do you think that support? Do you think that like supports a matrix type theory, or does that not
Yes,
coincide with that?
it does. It's you don't we don't know the nature of the matrix, but we know it is like a matrix. It's kind of like a mind in a way, in a sense, but it's a very random kind of mind. It's not a in other words, for this information field to really mean anything would require other conscious agents to observe it, you know. That's what I'm getting out of it.
So
So
it is like if you don't, like Einstein had said there's something to the effect like, do you really think that if you didn't observe the moon it wouldn't
moon, it would disappear.
exist or something like that? I thought
Correct. So we know
I
now the
think
moon.
that might have even been in the article or something.
Yep. The moon actually
But
doesn't exist.
my bad.
When no one's observing the moon, it doesn't exist as the moon. It's an information field. So as a quantum object, it does not exist as a quantum object. So once you observe the moon, yeah, it's represented. It kind of projects back onto, how we perceive it. But that's just our human brain. That's just our brain decoding the information we get through our eyes, ears, senses, and all that. But that's where science is really cool, because it can kind of like transcend all those limitations through mathematics and then eventually through experimentation. And we can kind of get to the proof of it, so to speak. You know what I mean? And yeah, so the moon, in a sense, doesn't exist until someone's looking at it, not at least as a quantum object.
Hmm.
That's what that means.
So
Yeah.
that gets back to the like if a tree drops in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did
Yep.
it make a sound or something like that?
Yeah. 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 It's
That's
very
interesting.
philosophical.
It's really unusual. The reality that we are starting to observe is so much more dynamic and diverse than we ever thought. You know, you talked about this before with we started out with Newtonian physics, then we had Einstein and the theory of relativity, and now this new science is coming up appears to be showing us a reality that's really far removed from what we may have estimated. It's really unusual,
Yep. Yep.
to say the
And
least.
yeah, and
But
that's
let's
what
go back.
that's
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail us from all the. Let's go back. Now, would you say when you say an atheist? Like, originally, I thought like an atheist just disbelieved God. I thought that's, and now they're not. It seems like they're saying that no, that's wrong. Atheist does not disbelieve God. If we had some proof, we would believe. But
hmm
if we had some evidence, but I still say, how do you get to that claim? Because how could you say, what would be evidence of God? And do we have the science to evidence God if God exists? That would be my question to the atheist that says, hey, I'm sorry, man, I just don't see any evidence of God. And how do you make that leap of faith? I mean, where does that
hmm
come from, Scott? I can't
the
get to that. I can't.
you mean like the non-belief thing? Um,
Yeah,
so
like, I mean, it just came. There's no intelligence in the design. And then when you say, well, I think DNA may be a watch, and it looks like clearly it's a design. It's a base four mathematical model. That's not lucky. That's a definite design. And then
hmm
they're like, well, we're just not good at seeing a design. They look. This guy on the Atheist Experience, Jim Barrows, told me, well, he equated it to his metaphorical equation of what it was, well, this guy, he looked on the ocean floor and he looked what would look like steps for giants. And so, but then they realized that was just a natural formation under the sea. But I don't see how he equates that to DNA. Look, DNA is a mathematical model. It's a base for, and it's a base for mathematical model straight up. You can store information. You can store all of human history in the size of less than a thimble of DNA. And so there's something that's definitely, from my perspective, that's intelligence in the design. What do
hmm
you say to that?
I think that's true. Like I'm one who actually believes in intelligent design, just not in the way that the theists believe it. So, and this is based on um, some work that a biologist, I'm trying to pull him up, but did a lot of work as far as looking at, um, patterns in in the formation of cells, right?
Like the Fibonacci sequences or whatever, like
Kind of,
that kind of thing. Is that related?
kind of like so in a way, what he's observing and he's showing is that um, there is some sort of properties above DNA, not below or not within DNA, but above DNA that actually shapes the formation of anything, like any sort of life form. You could say like a frog or an amphibian that grows his arm back or whatever. It grows it back exactly the way it was before it was chopped off, for example. How does it know that? And it's intelligent in the sense that it's finding different ways to solve the same problem. So they've done experiments where they've put roadblocks in front of the cells formation. Say, well, if it's not intelligent, it'll just die right here because it only knows one way to do things. But as it is, these things code on the fly. Intelligent. So it's like figuring out ways to go around problems in order to, you know, propagate, these
It's like
living
a
organisms.
self-adapting. It's like
Yes.
a self-adapting codec that is like it accounts for any kind of scenario, and then you have mutations that advance it further. I mean, we can look just to the wolf, and you see now how did that produce a chihuahua in such a short time? Is because we hijacked the evolution of the wolf and domesticated it and got all these breeds, breeding different varieties of wolf until we get a chihuahua, I guess is the scenario there.
Yeah. And anybody in the audience that's interested in that, look at the work of Michael Levin. This is the biologist who I'm referring to. His name is Michael Levin. I can play a little video of a buddy of mine that did a video on this intelligent design and the proof and sign. He's an atheist too, so but it just lets you know that you don't have to be a theist in order to believe in some form of intelligent design. You don't have to be a Christian or a Abrahamic sort of person. You can be a pantheist or an atheist, someone who doesn't even believe in any of that, and still recognize the truth
But look at
that.
this. Look, what about this? What about like I've talked to like I have a friend that's a um, atheist, he claims, but yet he believes that this could be a matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I find that unusual because if you believe this could be a matrix, it seemed like something would have had to create a matrix, like some kind of coder or something. I mean, that seems like that's a slam dunk. You've got a creator there.
Kind of is, but the only thing that about the simulation arguments, like the matrix sort of arguments that's usually made, is they're not as really radical as what we've learned through science, through this non-locality thing. The simulation theory, all that's really saying is that some kid or some intelligent alien or somebody with a computer, who also lives in a physical reality, a material world, created a material computer and created beings like us, that like ancestor simulation could be like our future selves that's done this thing, right? But they're still in the material world. In other words, it's only kicking the can down the road. It's not really getting you to the beginning. Like, what created the simulators? What created those simulators? What created the simulators of simulators of simulators? Because it could go all the way back for an infinity. But where did
Yeah,
all those guys come from?
it, that's what
So,
it just gets back into that same conundrum of if you say God created it, well, who created God? It's like the same scenario that we keep getting down to, like you said, that uncertainty theory or whatever that was
mhm.
introduced. It
the
said no
only
matter what we know, there will always be some other question.
the only way to stop that can from getting kicked is to end up with some non-material entity, which could be some sort of whatever it is. Like, there's a theory called the amplituhedron, which is based on other theories beyond that, that are the thing that everything spawned from. So it's kind of like the God. It's kind of like the uncaused cause, some natural structure that we can only know about through the mathematics. Now they're doing tests to try to see if that thing is true, and this goes along with the local realism article I kept putting up there. It kind of falls into that because it kind of points out
Hey,
of our observable. Hmm?
what about the agnostic? I was just thinking about that. I had this up about what is love, and it says, "What does the Bible say about love?" And then it has a quote from 1 John 4:8 that says, "He who does not love does not know God, for God is love." Then it's talking about what we think about when we're thinking about love. Then I like that quote that it had from First Corinthians 13:4-8, but they've got it quoted differently here than the one I like. But they have it here as love is long suffering and kind. It does not envy, does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But I also read that in a Psychology Today years ago now, I remember this article on love, and it was talking about love is just a chemical reaction in the brain, that kind of thing, breaking it down in scientific terms. So
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. I think Patrick dropped off. Okay. Well, yeah. So hopefully he'll come back in. But yeah, for all these platitudes that are spoken about in the New Testament, beautiful work, they're not that unique. Even in its time period, there were writings before that that echo the same sentiments. Um, it doesn't make the New Testament special, but it does make it valuable if you value that. If you value those sort of platitudes, of course. But a lot of the Sermon on the Mount, for example, is comparable to the Dead Sea Scrolls, where you read almost verbatim the Sermon on the Mount, and the Dead Sea Scrolls are a couple hundred years older than the writings of the New Testament. Now, that doesn't mean that it's false or anything like that. It just means that these sort of ideas are not unique in human history. There's always been, um, you know, groups, people, societies that endorse these sort of values. You know what I mean? So, anyways, how that relates to the definitions, I'm not sure. I think anybody, regardless of what their label or definition for their views are, worldview is, you could possibly resonate with a lot of the teachings in the Bible, in the Hindu writings, um, Jewish writings, Islamic writings, and then later on some of the morality and promoted through Mormonism, Jehovah Witnesses, new religions. Um, doesn't mean that none of them are true. It only means that this is a common characteristic with human beings, man. We have uh, values, and we like to talk about them. We like to teach them, and we like to give these values over to God as if He was the author of these things, right? Well, if you believe we have free will, then we are the final authority on what we endorse. If you believe in God, if you believe in the Christian God or whatever God you believe in, you can say, well, God has all the authority. No, you have the authority, man. You are the one who consciously, with your free will, decided to choose Christianity over Hinduism or atheism or whatever. You were that final authority to choose your authority. It all goes back to you and your free will. So that's regardless of what worldview you hold. But yeah. So anyways, guys, if you want to call in, please do. Give me let me put on the invite code again. Obviously, Pat's having some technical difficulties. So if you want, man, just click the link. I put it right there. If you want to click into it, you can, and we can discuss all of these things if you'd like. Religion, philosophy, what have you. Um, yeah, man, it's interesting stuff, and a lot of people that are interested in this kind of conversation have some kind of vested interest in converting people to atheism or converting people to their brand of theism or what have you. All that's fine. But my suggestion is know your definitions, know what it is that you're actually wanting to convince people out of. You have to know what their position is first, you know what it is. And, you know, and if you can do that, then you're going to be well on your way to convincing people into your beliefs. But you're not going to do it if you're talking past them, are you? You're going to have to talk to them and deal with what they do believe. And they may recognize themselves as an atheist, and you may not agree with their use of the definition. But look, words have usages, they don't have intrinsic meanings, anyways. That's why the dictionary has multiple definitions for a word. You know, running could mean the running refrigerator, my running nose, running down the road, my engine is running. There's different usages of that one term. Same thing with atheism, theism. We can have a general idea, but it's always better to just hone in on what your interlocutor actually believes. That way, you're not talking past each other and you can communicate better, if that makes any sense. But yeah, if you like our conversations here, like and subscribe. And again, you're welcome to join the conversation. I'll talk to you. You can jump in. Maybe Patrick will come back on and we can continue talking on this matter. But yeah, if you want to jump on in, do so. I'd love to talk to you. Um, People out here on social media that express interest, but they don't seem to want to join the convo, man. Let's have a little fun, man. I'm chilling. I'm here. I'm open. I can talk about anything, man. But yeah, if you're a Christian, I'd love to hear what your definitions are. How do you describe Christianity? Some people say, well, it's what the Bible says, it's what the New Testament outlines. That's all you need to know. Yet we have over 6,000 Christian religions out here that say the same exact thing you do. So we still have to get back to what it is you want to actually discuss. And that would be awesome. Maybe I can get someone to join in. Hopefully, we'll get someone to jump in. Otherwise, I'll have to kill the broadcast. But, anyways, what I'll do, maybe what I can do is present this video that talks about intelligent design. Um, from the perspective of a biologist. And this guy's kind of doing a reaction to it.
video. If you watched any of my previous videos on the macroscopic and microscopic forms of life, I argue that we're actually part of a continuing system of life that goes up to many levels, possibly all the way up to the galaxies, even the universe. One key sticking point I couldn't figure out, didn't click in my brain until I saw Michael Levin's work, was how do nations, for instance, how do they organize collectively? Because if you look at the actual DNA of the people involved in nations, it doesn't code specifically to form a nation, right? We can't find that in the genome. So where's this data coming from? Was it coming from human DNA? Is it coming from somewhere else? Michael Levin here shows is where does that anatomical pattern come from? How do things regenerate? How will an arm of a salamander regenerate to the exact right proportions and stop growing? You know, if we break through on this medical breakthrough, imagine the possibility.
Over some amount of time, they, without any instructions from outside, they spontaneously self-assembled a creature that has sophisticated cognition and first-person perspective and all these things. And this is a cross-section through a human torso. Look at the remarkable order here, right? The just amazing invariant structure where all the tissues, organs, everything is in the right place next to the right thing. Where does that anatomical pattern come from? I mean, we can read genomes now, and we know it's not in the DNA. DNA specifies proteins. It does not directly specify anatomy. So we have these difficult questions of how do these collections of cells know what to make, when to stop? How do we convince them to rebuild after damage? And as engineers, and this is going to lead into Josh's talk next, we'd like to know how far can we push this actually? Could we get these same cells to build something completely different?
Amazing breakthroughs here. I mean, just think about how complicated the human body is. The last account I saw was 37 trillion cells. How does each little tiny cell actually know what to do? How?
Good question. Is what the creationists, intelligent design folks always talk about, like all this complexity. Now, complexity isn't necessarily the hallmark of design. Usually it's simplicity because you're focused on a particular task. But we don't really see that with the human body. For example, there's a lot of organs we no longer use, like wisdom teeth, and men have nipples, all kinds of different things. But that doesn't mean that necessarily there isn't some sort of intelligent design at work. Maybe it's just not that intelligent, or maybe it's a different kind of intelligence, if that makes sense. Anyways, let's continue.
How does it form and create actual biological living tissue of billions of cells, hundreds of billions of cells? Just mind-boggling. It's not in the DNA, right? DNA has just your 4 base pairs. How could that possibly code for all of this? And what we're finding, which I've always suspected, and I'm sure other people have as well, there must be a secondary layer, like a secondary coding pattern on top of DNA. So how could it actually code? Michael Levin here appears to have found how that process works. And he calls that process intelligence. Watch how he defines intelligence here and how it relates to the collective organization of an organism.
And so now this emergent feed-forward patterning process, which people often think about with complexity theory and emergence, lots of local rules, and then out comes something amazing. There's actually even much more. I mean, that's amazing enough, but it's actually much more interesting than that. So the first thing we got to remember is that cells are extremely competent. This is a single cell creature. This is a lacrimarium. There's no brain. There's no nervous system. This creature handles all of its physiological, metabolic, and morphological goals at the single cell scale. If you're into soft robotics, you're probably really jealous of this. We don't have anything that begins to compare with this degree of control. Again, one single cell.
So think about what Michael just said there, or Dr. Levin. He just said that this thing has no brain. There's no brain in this single cell organism, right? I mean, think of jellyfish. How does that work? How can that possibly work? Our current understanding of biology is that shouldn't work.
Definition of intelligence that I quite like from William James, which is the ability to reach the same ends by different means.
So he defines intelligence as same ends by different means.
Right. So that's how you can make a differentiation between an intelligent thing and a non-intelligent thing is that it's finding different ways to solve the same problem. Pretty good quantifier, pretty good definition.
Kidney tubule, and it looks like this, and there's 8 to 10 cells that work together to build this thing. If you modify the initial egg in a way that produces very gigantic cells, fewer and fewer cells will work together to make exactly the same diameter lumens until the cells get so big that just one cell will wrap around itself to produce exactly the same anatomical outcome.
So this is his first example. And basically, they take Newt cells, so Newt cells that split. And first off, he describes it, we can't actually split anything perfectly in the real world, okay? We haven't been able to actually mimic this behavior of perfect identical splits. The Newt kidney says they split, okay? But what they find is it will change. The morphology of it will physically change. It will use less cells if those cells are not provided, right? Even with less cells, it will still end up forming the same final shape from different beginning starting points. It ends up at the same complex pattern and function.
The leg will begin to grow. It will grow exactly as much as needed from wherever it is that you cut it, and it will stop when a correct salamander leg has been produced, right? So we need to understand this process of anatomical homeostasis. You keep growing and keep remodeling until you get to the correct shape, and then you can stop. Some sort of means-ends analysis, something like that.
Here's the second.
Okay, so don't have to go into all of that whole video, but basically, there is a form of intelligence we can see through nature, right? Do we necessarily need a God? Well, how do we define God? First of all, we have to define God. Is God necessarily a conscious being? And what do we mean by conscious? Can you be intelligent and be unconscious? I don't know. Seems like in order to solve problems, you have to be kind of aware of yourself in space and time. To me, it seems like that awareness is that consciousness we're talking about, that it knows what needs to be done in order to know what action to take, right? So I think intelligent entities like, say, these single cells that are doing all this work, they're doing it intelligently and consciously. Now, it may be like a very basic, almost robotic form of intelligence, like a high level AI computer that we may have, something like that. But it's still intelligent. Now, is that God? Many Christians would say, no, that's a slap in the face to God. God doesn't operate that way. God has fingers and he snaps them and things come to be, like Thanos. That's what it is with the Abrahamic God. They have that anthropomorphic quality, right? The God is like human beings. But in this case, it looks like this intelligence is sort of at least built in to the universe, Now, thinking about how this universe, this observable universe, came from something deeper, like some deeper structure beyond the Planck scales, could that be where consciousness comes from? Maybe some sort of law that's kind of embedded in that structure that gets projected out onto the material world? Could be, I don't know. I think Donald Hoffman, which is another researcher, he's looking at that idea. That'd be really interesting. So we can kind of find God in a way, but I just suspect I'm just very curious whether the God we find is going to be anything like the God of our traditions and our Bibles and things like that. It could just be some sort of natural structure. And it could explain everything same way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a material thing or a physical thing. Why would it? Why should it have to be? Maybe there's some sort of unknown property that naturally exists in the cosmos, right? Could be. And that's why I remain open. I don't want to limit myself to some religious book with the answer. I like science. I like the idea of science. I like the way that science sort of comes at and approaches these sort of problems with humility, not assuming the the answer, the conclusion, but let the evidence lead you. You know, and if the evidence leads us to intelligent design in some form, which I think it has already, then great. I think that would be awesome. I'm not against it. A lot of people who fall into these labels, they actually are married to them. Like these identities are shuts their thinking down. It's like, this is what I've concluded and that's it. There's no more thinking about it for me. There's no more discovery. I am an atheist, whatever that means, or I'm a theist or a Christian or whatever that means. And that's where my faith is, and that's where I'm going to die on. That's the hill I'm going to die on. All evidence to the contrary be damned. That's just intellectual suicide for one. I don't want to live that way. I'd rather be someone who admits they don't know all the answers. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by agnostic. I just don't know everything. Like I'm agnostic towards the ontological, fundamental reality, whatever that is. Some kind of structure. I know it's there. Could be a personal God, could not be. Could be just some unknown, natural, unconscious thing. I don't know. Maybe consciousness emerges out of that structure somehow. I don't know. There's all kinds of models on the table: panpsychism, idealism. But I think materialism is pretty much a dead philosophy. We know that the fundamental reality is not material, it's not energy and matter. Quantum fields, there's something beyond quantum fields, is what we're determining. So it's not even that kind of energy. So, anyways, yeah, the question's big. Um, a lot of hubris on every side of the aisle, the theistic side, atheistic side. Um, why should we conclude before we actually know? Is that really honest? Christians, tell me, is it really honest to say you know something when you can't demonstrate that you do? If you can't show it, you don't know it, right? I always ask people, you know the God exists? Let's see it. Show me the evidence. But then they boo-hoo it. Oh, evidence is not, it's not important. You know, we need faith. Shout out to Nanology. Yo, what's up, buddy? If you want to join the convo, you can click on the link, man. You're more than welcome. Over here talking to myself. Now I know I'm talking to you, somebody else, hopefully. But yeah, man, just talking about the deeper things of life, man. I've turned 54 today. So it's a day to think about these big questions and everything. And then Knowledge says, I'm watching another stream and chatting in another. Well, hey, you can multitask, baby. Hopefully, I've got an interesting conversation, man, that you are resonating with. Talking about atheism, theism, everything in between, agnosticism. What does it really mean? We're talking about the big questions, intelligent design. I believe in a form of intelligent design myself, based on the evidence. Yeah, you're anti-theist. Perfect. I don't know if I'm an anti-theist. I'm not sure about that. I've had bad experience with religion. I came out of religion. I was very angry with religion and all of that. But just not sure if I'm anti-theist, because look, everybody's journey is for a reason. I mean, I had to go through my journey to get where I'm at. If I didn't take it, I wouldn't be where I am today. And where we are today could be just arbitrary. I'm not saying that there's some great grand purpose out there for us. But yeah. Personally, I don't think it should be taken literally. That's what I'm against. Yeah, I can resonate with that because there's no way for people to prove their literalism without running into contradictions, in my experience. Um, like, did Jesus resurrect in physical form? That's an extraordinary claim, and I don't think there's the evidence supports a standard that I have, for belief. My standards are pretty high, especially when it comes to extraordinary crap. You know what I'm saying? Um, and yeah, but I would agree, use good ideals where you find them. So yeah, and every religion has them. That's kind of like why I'm a pantheist. I can see truth in all religions. Not that I agree with every facet of the belief system. Like I don't believe in miracles. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. At face value, I just don't. I may believe in them as far as like a cool lesson or something like that. But yeah, you get your ideals where you can get them from. And I guess the power with religious storytelling is in the emotion that it triggers in people. Like, it may be a touching story, that the story of Jesus is very touching. Maybe it causes people to really feel, oh wow. And that motivates them to take it serious, the messaging serious, maybe. For me, I wasn't like that. I was kind of like, well, if he didn't walk on water, then the motherfucker ain't real. And if he didn't walk on water and he didn't rise from the dead, then what he's saying is no different than what my neighbor's talking about right now. You know what I mean? But I just can't agree with Yahweh's moral nature. Right, right, right. That's the guy that ordered his children to go slaughter infants and camels and donkeys and women and everything like that. Ordered Moses to kill a bunch of his people. Flooded the entire world, drowning the unborn, drowning the innocent. And of course, they'll always say, well, he didn't kill them. Yahweh didn't kill anybody. He just relocated them to a better place. That's all. Well, if that's true, then did Jesus really die, or did he just relocate to a better place for 3 days and then come back to earth and then go to heaven to be king of the universe again? Is that really a sacrifice? I struggle with those kind of things. Yeah, it's all relocation, man. Because that's the only excuse they got. It's the only one they infant relocation service. Yeah, man. Because tell them that way drowned little kids, and drowning is a horrible way to go, by the way. And yet the almighty, all loving, all powerful, all knowing God drowned infants. Not very loving. And this is Jesus, by the way. Yahweh is Jesus, according to some versions of Christianity that believe in the Trinity. So Jesus drowned kids, really? The same Jesus that used to have kids run and sit on his lap and shit? Really? I don't know. If you look at Yahweh as he is Jesus, he's the same God. If God and the Son and the Holy Spirit are essentially the same being, if that's what you believe, that's what you're saying. In either case, even if you didn't, like I was a Jehovah Witness, we didn't believe Jehovah or Yahweh was Jesus. They were two separate entities. Still, Jehovah Yahweh was, Jesus' father. He was the perfect set of morality. He was the standard of morals, of what is right and wrong in the world. You couldn't know what was possible or impossible without Yahweh or Jehovah. And yet, as we see, this is the same guy that drowns kids and orders his people to slice open children with a sword, right? Doesn't seem very all loving. You know what I mean? I'm not familiar with pantheism, nanology. Pantheism is the belief that reality, the universe, and the cosmos are identical with divinity and a supreme supernatural being or entity pointing to the universe as being an immanent creator deity. Yeah, in some ways, yes. For me, though, I'm a naturalistic or scientific pantheism. So what I'm doing is just acknowledging that I feel a certain kind of awe with the mystery of the universe, cosmos, and nature, and it's divine in that sense. And out of nature comes me, and I'm conscious, and all of these things. And so it's more of an expression. It's more like a philosophy. It's not a scientific claim. It's not like the universe is God, so I have to prove the universe has a beard and has sandals and sits on a cloud and all that shit. No, it's more of an expression of awe. And I use it sometimes interchangeably depending on who I speak to. It's kind of like a tool. So, like with a Christian, for example, or a Muslim, for example, they would say, well, God perfectly explains good, evil, consciousness, all the things we see in the world through the stories of the religion or whatever, or the God himself. And I'm just saying that naturalism explains everything that this supernatural God can explain, only better, because we have a track record of naturalism being the explanation for every single problem that's ever been solved in the world. Every mystery that's ever been solved has had a naturalistic explanation, not a supernatural one, right? So, in that sense, scientific pantheism or naturalistic pantheism solves that problem. And plus, you don't inherit like the problem of evil, because my estimation of pantheism is not necessarily of a conscious God. Not necessarily. It doesn't rely on that. So this natural structure or object that creates the world um, could be, you know, unconscious, right? Just nature. So in other words, I'm just arguing for naturalism, really, and just using the term pantheism to kind of give it a more descriptive way of talking about the universe in a higher way, maybe. And it works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. And for those that it does not work for, I don't blame them. You know, because I don't know whether the universe has this immaterial mind or not. I don't have any reason to think that that's the case, nor is it necessary. It could just be an unconscious intelligence. Now, at some point, I think that there's some sort of intelligence that emerges, perhaps at some level, especially when it comes to life. Like I was just playing that video where even single cells are aware of themselves and other objects in space time and make intelligent decisions for promoting, you know, DNA evolution, pretty much, of living organisms. That's a form of intelligence because it's finding different ways to solve the same problem. So it's a very rudimentary form of intelligence, perhaps. Um, but beyond that, is there like this super mind or super cosmic mind? I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that. It could be. Who knows? But it's just not necessary. So I don't believe it till I have evidence for it. It's that simple. Um, but this sort of tool helps with talking to Christians and talking to religious people in general. Because when you say the word atheist out the gate, they just kind of shut down, in my experience. But when you use something like pantheism, at least you're kind of opening the door to discussing these sort of bigger questions, in my experience. You can get them to actually see the value in science and see the value in naturalism and that philosophy, right? But yeah, I don't know is always the best answer if it's honest, I don't know. And that's a good place to be, because it means you now have a space for learning. If I know every damn thing, I can't learn a damn thing. And that's part of the beauty of life, is to be in the middle of all this mystery. Gives you things to think about, gives you things to study. It's a good way to spend time, you know, looking at the deeper things of life. I wish I was better at math and everything. I probably could have been a scientist, but I'm just not. That's not my skill set. It just isn't. But I like to think about them. I like to follow them, and I admire people that can put all this stuff together and use that rigorous method of mathematics. That language is very rigorous, and it's the best language so far we have in describing, the world around us. Yep, being a truth seeker. Um, you see, I know some people think we shouldn't be saying the word atheist. Well, I have mixed feelings about that. It just depends on what my motives are at the time. But overall, I think that um, people in a civilized society should respect everyone as people. Now, they may not respect their beliefs, but if you can respect a person despite their beliefs, then that's a step in the right direction. No one should have to hide what they identify as just in order to keep the peace, because then you're living in an uncivilized society of people that don't respect each other unless they follow these criteria, right? That's not the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where you can be an atheist or whatever and you don't get triggered by it, right? People get over this thing about hating words and labels, and that's because everyone gets so attached to their beliefs, their views. And like one value, like in Buddhism, is the principle of unattachment, where a lot of suffering comes from this idea that you are your beliefs. Yourself is tied into your worldviews and stuff like that. But I don't know if that's really healthy, because people change their minds and people discriminate against each other based on their beliefs. And I just don't think it's very realistic. Like, if I really think about it, this sense of self is kind of a construction. It's kind of like your genes plus all of your memories and experiences coalesce together to create this story that you hold on to, which you call yourself. You're not a name, you're not a job title, you're not any of those things. You're much more than that. you know Basically, you're a construction of all these things, and that's what people mean by self. But it's all imaginary shit. So being attached to that imaginary ideal may not actually be all that healthy sometimes. um we love our labels. Yes, we do, sir. More and more are created all the time. Yes, they are. Language is constantly evolving, isn't it? And especially with the advent of the internet, and now everybody is demanding that words be defined a certain way, that we approach each other with the correct definitions and terminologies and identity. And this is opening up the door for identity politics, and the powers that be, politicians and everybody else, can use those to divide and conquer. And it can be unhealthy, you know because it's just another way to kind of categorize and put people in unrealistic boxes. If you're white, if you're male, if you're female, if you're black, then you have to believe this or that. And that is who you are defined by. You're letting society define you by these labels and words and imaginary bullshit, instead of just being not as shallow as that, but having a little substance about yourself, be an individual, be own up to your authority, man. You are the authority in your life. At the end of the day, the buck stops here, man. And when you start looking at churches and other people and movie stars and politicians and people like that as your authority figures, books as your authorities, I mean, you're still the authority at the end of the day because you chose these authorities. But if that's the case, why would you choose them? Like, it's always up to you. It's always coming down to you. So you can always change your mind about things. And I think people need to grasp that idea, the individual, the idea of the individual. That's what makes us different than our robots and shit, our AI. We're individuals, man. We have some form of free will, I think. Not ultimate or libertarian free will, in my opinion, but you know, we have that capacity to transcend our tribalism and become individuals. And that's kind of what shapes our evolution too. It's like for every ant colony that's circling around a tree, there's a few other ants that are deviating from the group, and they're learning things and they're doing things that can benefit everybody. And we humans can be the same way. It's like, yeah, we're kind of like an ant colony in the sense that we we follow the leaders, we follow our authority figures, um, but we also have to understand that our nature is to be individuals too. I mean, we are social animals. That's great. That's who we are. There's no way around it. But we can use our individuality to actually evolve our tribes. I think that would be healthy. It's how you have renegades like Albert Einstein and renegades like Sir Isaac Newton and Copernicus and all sorts of scientific figures and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and people like that that stood up against the powers at their time. They didn't follow the crowd, and they actually did their own thing and kind of taught people and led people into a different viewpoint. I think that's healthy to have different viewpoints. Um, so I just think that there's a value in that. It's not all about following the crowd. It's also about having individuality and having dignity and taking ownership for your life. And that's why I like to talk about it in terms of religion, because it's an easy way to talk about this stuff because it has everything right there in front of you that you need to address. We're talking about labels, you're talking about belief systems, worldviews, um, discussion. you know should all beliefs be respected? Should any belief be respected? Is there some sort of inherent rule that we should respect all beliefs? I think we should respect people because it helps build healthy societies. But if there are beliefs that are just wrong, they deserve to burn. They deserve to be thrown in the fire, man. If they can't stand the rigor of questions, then where's the value in that? How can I value something that's just too easy to fall for? There's no, there's nothing, there's no constraints, there's no falsification. If something can't be falsified, if it has no constraints, then it's kind of meaningless, right? That's the way I look at it. Um, but again, guys, man, whoever's out there watching, you can tune right in. I'm gonna get off of here in a little bit. I think Pat's just not able to get back because he's having technical difficulties. So our conversation kind of ended abruptly. But if you're interested in conversing on it, we can do that. Um, I've got some time to kill, but we'll just see. Let me see what Pat's up with Patrick over here. Oops. Yep, got a message from him. Phone acting up. No worries, man. It happens. That's what happens with our limited technology. You know, that's what is bound to happen at times. That's the only thing about when I do these is I have to be sure that my conversation partner has a good connection. You know, if he does, then it makes for a good show. If not, then it gets a little rough. So, anyways, looking to see if anybody out here may want to jump in. Um, but yeah, looks like no one wants to talk, man. It's all right. Anyways, guys, man, thanks for the viewership at any rate. Spending a little time with me. I've been going now for about hour and 16 minutes, so not bad, not bad, not bad. Next time though, man, I want to have a guest that can stay on and we can have a nice fruitful conversation. Sorry, Pat, you having trouble. Not your fault, but hopefully next time it'll be a lot better. Anyways, man, thanks for everybody showing up. Nanology, thanks for your input and participation. I know you're on different chats and different shows. Um, Also, Frank Lovell, he jumped in for a little bit. Thanks a lot for jumping on when you did. Thanks, Patrick, for everything. Yeah, man, no problem. Analogy for chatting. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast now. Um, and we will resume next time. I'll let you know. Y'all be easy. Bye.